Breathing in, I enjoy the cool air inside the hall. Breathing out, I'm grateful to be together but not be too hot. So we'll start with 3 sounds of the bell. And Sister August Moon is sitting at the bell this morning. So she'll invite 3 sounds of the bell. And that's an invitation for us to come back to our body, come back to our breath, and enjoy deeply the present moment. Good morning, dear respected Thay, dear friends. How many of you are here for the first time at Deer Park? Oh, many. Okay, welcome. And this is our sanctuary in the hidden mountain above Escondido, and these past few days it's been really hot and humid. And so I want to share a little bit about a practice that is very popular in the monastery. It's called hammock meditation. So it's very nice if you can find 2 trees. The trunk of the tree. Has anyone here practiced hammock meditation before? Nobody, very few of you. Oh my gosh, you don't know what you're missing. Okay. You know, it said that when the Spanish arrived on what they call Hispaniola, which we now call I guess the island of Haiti in Santo Domingo, is that right? Or was it Cuba? I can't remember. Then the native peoples there used hammocks for sleeping. And as far as we know, that's when Europeans first discovered the wonder that is the hammock. And very quickly, the hammock solved the problem, which, especially on ships, to sleep on a ship. You have wooden beds, and when there was some kind of wind or storm, people were thrown about within these wooden beds and slammed against the wall, and people would die because they would just be thrown around and hit very hard wood insides of the ship. And so when they discovered this wonderful innovation of the hammock, the sailors were so happy because they could hang the hammocks inside the ship. And even if you had a very violent storm, you just swing back and forth like this. And even if you try it in a proper hammock, you can flip all the way around, but you won't fall out because it stays close to, it holds you like the mother cradling her child, like a papoose. That feeling of somehow swaying and feeling it wrapped. Get from a hammock is very similar to the feeling of your mother holding you as a child. It's not static or fixed, but somehow it sways. So there are many parts of hammock meditation. So one of them is being held. Everybody got that? Okay. Being held, embraced. There's the swaying or swinging. But actually, swinging in a hammock, I don't like so much. I like swaying. Just very gentle. When you're in the hammock, you're very aware that I'm not static, but I swing. And sometimes you swing both ways. You swing this way from the wind, and depending on the width of the trunk of the tree that you attach the hammock to, it sways this way as well. There's a kind of elastic motion. And then there's a cloud watching. You might see different shapes in the clouds. We're so used to looking down at the ground. So hammock meditation gives you a wonderful opportunity to lay and look up at the sky. I feel it's very important to add more minutes to your day that you're looking at the sky. Not when you're walking. When you're walking, we're aware of our step, aware of the contact our feet make with the earth. But when you're laying in the hammock, you have all the time you like to just lay there and look at the sky. Just contemplate the vastness of the sky. You know, if we look at the planet Earth, we just have a very, very thin layer. It's probably not even that thick of what we call the atmosphere. And because of scattering of light from the sun, we experience during the day the blue sky. But in fact, we know that we're looking at outer space. We're looking at the cosmos, even during the daytime. Usually it's only at night that we see the stars, because that bright light is not being scattered by the water droplets in the atmosphere. So we see, at night I see the stars, I feel in contact with the universe. But even during the daytime, you're also looking at the stars. You just can't see them because of the scattered light. So this is kind of the macro, this is the close-up. So we have our little friend here who's laying in a hammock with just that little thin layer of atmosphere protecting him like a womb from the harshness of outer space. So that's the kind of meditation you can do while you're practicing hammock meditation, laying there looking at the clouds. You can remember that not only am I being embraced by the hammock, and by the way, it wasn't until the British tried to, some British kind of a little bit scandalized by the use of the hammock. They wanted something that looked more like a bed, so they put a bar across the top of the hammock to make it stay open, because they felt a bit scandalized by somehow the closeness of the original hammock. And so they put this bar here. And when I was a kid, we had one of those hammocks at my house, and we used to love to swing in it and then try to flip each other out. So we lost, by putting that bar, you lose the quality of embracing of the hammock. So I highly recommend, if after this talk you go and find a hammock, you make sure you get one that doesn't have a bar, so you can experience the embracing quality of the hammock. So cloud watching, it means also universe watching. Looking at the cosmos. And one of the best parts about hammock meditation is you have nowhere to go and nothing to do. And this is very crucial for your state of mind while practicing hammock meditation. Nowhere to go, nothing to do. So you may be curious about this circle we have behind the altar, arrived at home. That is a calligraphy of our teacher. Some of you may have heard of our teacher. He passed away in January. But actually, as his students, we don't see that he has gone anywhere. We don't see that our teacher has left us, because we're not caught in ideas of coming and going. We can practice looking at the cloud and we see our teacher in the cloud. And when his body transforms into the elements of earth and air and water and fire, we see those elements were already there when we say his body is living. And as his students, the student of our teacher, we recognize that his actions of body, speech, and mind, they continue. We are all here because of his thinking, his speech, his bodily actions. This meditation hall is built with the conditions of his thinking, his speech, and his bodily action. And we ourselves, we continue our teacher through our own thinking, speech, and bodily actions, just as we continue our parents, our teachers, our friends. So this practice of nowhere to go, nothing to do, is a practice of seeing that actually our ideas about ourselves may be very limited. When we look deeply, this body, every cell of this body is a continuation of our parents, of our ancestors. And our actions are also the continuation of our ancestors, our teachers, all of our friends. The way we think, the way we speak and act is not coming from nowhere. It's a manifestation of and continuation of our teachers and friends and all society. So when we talk about our teacher, we say For the sake of the convention, we say, he passed away on January 22nd, 2022. But in our heart, we see he hasn't really gone anywhere. Because as a teacher, he knew how to practice this very deep teaching, know where to go, nothing to do. And especially he started with the practice of mindful breathing. Many people who come here have an idea about meditation or Zen, and they think, yes, meditation. I need to sit in full lotus position, upright, my shoulders relaxed, maybe for half an hour, 45 minutes. That is meditation. But that is just a notion that we have about meditation. If we look deeply into the practice of Zen or meditation, we see that it's not dependent on the position of our body. So we have the right to practice meditation while we are laying in the hammock. And maybe we can find that a bit more easy to begin with than sitting with our legs crossed in meditation. I see some of us are moving around. You're sitting on the cushion. Maybe you don't have so much experience with it. And you find sometimes you sit with your legs crossed, sometimes you put your legs behind you, sometimes you move around, because somehow our body may not yet be accustomed to sitting in that way. So we don't need to force ourselves thinking, I'm only meditating by sitting in a lotus position on a cushion. We can practice meditation in a chair. We just practice walking meditation, and we can we'll later on practice eating meditation, and we can also practice very deep, powerful practice of hammock meditation. The Buddha didn't, as far as I know, have hammocks in his time, but today we have hammocks, thanks to the people of Hispaniola. So if you ever go to Plum Village, or if you take time to walk around Deer Park, you might find hidden under a tree in the shade a hammock. And many of the monks and nuns, they have their own secret hammock hidden away in the mountain. So we are already hidden in the mountain up here in Deer Park, but there are even more hidden places, I promise you, in this valley. And if you have a chance to stay here for a week, you get to practice lazy day. So every Monday in the monastery, we have what we call lazy day. In most Asian countries like Vietnam, the monks and nuns, they are expected to practice chanting the sutra and sitting meditation and formal lunch and so forth every day, Monday, Tuesday, 7 days a week, 31 days per month, 365 days a year. And so our teacher grew up in that kind of environment. And talking about a lazy day would be blasphemous. Life and death are urgent. We need to practice every moment of our daily life. How can the monks and nuns have a lazy day? And the truth is that lazy day in the Plum Village tradition, or here at Deer Park, is also a practice. Because when our teacher came over in the 60s to speak out against the war in Vietnam, he encountered the peace movement, and many people wanted to have him march for peace and yell out for peace in Vietnam. And his experience of the peace movement was that it wasn't very peaceful. people were calling for peace, but they didn't have very much peace in their heart. And so with his practice and his observation, he said, the culture of the West needs to have a lazy day. It needs a day where we have nowhere to go and nothing to do, where we practice just laying in a hammock. Whatever our favorite meditation is, it doesn't mean that we don't do anything in that day, but we practice letting go of our ideas, our concepts, our notions about practice, our notions about enlightenment, our notions about nirvana, and we learn to dwell happily in the present moment. Dwelling happily in the present moment. So, practicing to be arrived at home means we mastered how to dwell happily in the present moment. It means we don't base our joy, our happiness on something in the future. We don't think, oh, if I only get that job, if I can only pay off the mortgage on my house, if I can only have my whole family come together for the holidays, then I will be truly happy. So long as we take refuge in that happiness, in our idea, and we try to control things outside of ourselves, we can never be truly happy. That is the insight of the Buddhist tradition. The Buddha had the insight because he had many people around him. He was from a very prominent family on the plain of the Ganges River, and they had so many expectations for this talented young man to be a leader in the community, to make his family more prominent, more famous, more respected, to increase the wealth of his family, of his community. And he, as a young man, he observed the expectations of those around him, his parents, his community, and he observed his own mind, and he saw that in those expectations, he could never be truly happy. He observed that people who obtained those things, they were just more busy, and they didn't enjoy their life. The more things they had to manage, the more busy they were, the less time they had to really enjoy life. So here we are in 2022 in the United States of America. Many of you may have heard, I think his name is Thorstein Veblen, is that right? The theory of the leisure class. He said that almost more than a century ago, that with the rate at which society was producing innovation, within many decades, people wouldn't have to work for more than 5 or 10 hours per week. And they would have all this leisure time and what would they do with it? Never in human history on the planet have we had so much free time. Have we had all the things that we need? We've industrialized agriculture. We've learned how to put ammonia into, nitrogen into the soil, and synthetic, suddenly massive energy inputs from fossil fuels. So soon society will have nowhere to go and nothing to do. Everything is provided. We have loads of free time. What will we do with it? And here we are, 2022. And some of us are working 80 hours per week. What for? What is it for? What are we running after? Does anybody ask that question? This is a kind of practice. We need to ask ourselves that question. I'm not going to tell you. It's for your own insight, your own deep looking and contemplation. What am I running for? So these are good topics for hammock meditation. You can contemplate them anytime, but I find it very lovely to enjoy contemplating these kind of questions when I'm laying in a hammock. It helps me to put a proper perspective on things. When I'm laying in the hammock and I'm enjoying looking out onto the universe, looking into the cloud. For example, I can observe the cloud and ask myself, what does the cloud want? And you might say, well, the cloud wants to become rain. But the cloud might just like being a cloud. Maybe you think it's silly to look at a cloud and ask, what does the cloud want? But somehow it's not silly for us to ask ourselves, what is it that I want? So what is the difference between me and a cloud? I am 60% or more water. The cloud is mostly water. When the cloud becomes the rain, then it transforms itself and it no longer manifests as a cloud. Suddenly it is raindrops coming down, joining the stream, joining the earth, becoming the river, and flowing into the ocean. And then with the sun, the kiss of the sun on the surface of the ocean, the water comes up again and manifests another time as a cloud. So contemplating on that cycle of the cloud becoming the rain, becoming the water in the soil, becoming the stream or the spring, becomes the stream, becomes the river, the ocean, becoming a cloud again. We can ask ourselves, what does the cloud want? Does the cloud ever die? So then we can ask that same question of ourselves. So I observe this body. This is something I like to practice during hammock meditation. I'm swaying in the hammock. I feel the embrace of the hammock. And I look at the cloud, and I reflect on the cloud becoming the rain and going into the ocean and becoming a cloud again. And I use those same eyes of impermanence, and I direct it towards this very body. And I say, why am I so preoccupied with this body? I want my hair to look perfect. I don't have any hair, you may have noticed. But when I was younger, I had hair, and then I think, before I go out of the house, I need to look at the mirror to see, how is my hair? And we say, does the cloud ever think about what its hair looked like? It's like, I could just be a little bit more fluffy as a cloud. Maybe I just spruce it up a bit with some hairspray, just a little bit on the edges, because somebody could be practicing hammock meditation, and they might see me. It's silly, right? We think it's quite silly when we think about it. But this is part of the reason. Many of the kids come on retreat here and they say, why do the monks and nuns shave their heads? And I'm not sure anyone's ever answered that way, but I think I found a new answer, which says, we want to practice being like a cloud. Do you think the cloud cares about how it looks when it's floating through the sky and someone looking up at the cloud in the hammock? It would be very silly to think the cloud is like making itself look more beautiful in order to, just in case someone happens to be practicing hammock meditation. I mean, it could be very lucky and be floating through the sky and nobody is looking up, so it can kind of pass unnoticed. But it's very exposed to being a cloud. You have millions of people. At any moment, they could look up and see you. And you'd be horrified, if you haven't kind of made yourself more fluffy before you do that. So these are the kind of meditations I like to do when I'm in the hammock, to help me put my life in perspective and see what's truly most important. Is it that I look beautiful, sexy, and attractive when I go out and expose myself in public, like giving a talk? Or is it easier just to shave my hair off? Maybe we can listen to the sound of the bell, enjoy our breathing, and contemplate our body as a cloud. There's a staircase at my mother's house, and if she ever invites you over, you'll see going up the staircase, I think maybe 9 or 10 photos of me, like every year, from when I was in elementary school up to high school or college or something. And it's a kind of torture to think, that people, that this little boy becoming a man, he did not have the insight yet about a cloud never dies, and so he was very concerned about his appearance. And so you get to see, like, on display as an exhibit, all of his experiments with hairstyles, and it's kind of a cultural history of growing up in the United States from the 80s and the 90s. And so when I look at that kind of hall of shame, I kind of giggle and I practice with it. I say, okay, before I wanted to ask my mom, can you please take those down? But I see that it gives my mom happiness, so I don't say anything like that. But I'm a little bit embarrassed about it, to think that I had so much concern about how I appeared. But now I have more compassion, and I see that that is quite natural, because we are human, and we want to create good feelings in other people, and we want to be seen and heard as somebody. We feel a deep need to be accepted. Yeah, we don't necessarily want to be the best. We just want to be good enough. And so this is another practice that I enjoy doing while I'm in the hammock. I look at that and I say, in what ways am I living my life that I feel I'm not good enough? And then I look at that question and I say, what does it mean to be good enough? And by whose criteria? I don't think any of us asked to be born, and yet somehow we find ourselves here, alive on the planet Earth. And so Buddhist meditation is a way of realizing the situation. We have been born. We haven't necessarily asked to be born, and yet here we are. So what do we do with the situation? So we can make it unpleasant and painful for ourselves and for others, or we can do like the Buddha did. He looked deeply in himself and he saw, what is the cause of my suffering? He really wanted to know.
what is the cause of my suffering? Because I know I suffer. And if you think you don't suffer, you might want to look again. I think it's helpful if you're feeling really good, you feel like you're on the top of the world, that everything's perfect. Look at what you do, and ask yourself, why do you do the things you do? Because if you ask yourself, you'll find out that somehow there's still something inside of you that says it's not good enough. And there you can find your suffering. And that way you overcome your pride. You see, like the Buddha did, that there is suffering. That was one of his first insights. There is suffering. Maybe we can put this as our friend in the hammock, his meditation. There is suffering. Yeah, that's right. Suffering. That is the first contemplation. If we don't see the suffering in ourselves, then we cannot realize true happiness. Happiness and suffering are like two sides of one coin. They are not separate. We can feel some pleasure, some joy, very fleeting. But if we want to realize lasting happiness in our life, it means we need to look into the suffering, because it's the suffering which has the key to our happiness. We call it the cause of suffering, or causes of suffering. And our teacher has updated the language. He called it the path of suffering, or ill-being. It can be a literal path, like we decide to go here instead of there. And it can be a narrative in our minds. What kind of story are we telling ourselves every day about our own life, about our goals and our aspirations? Because if we look deeply into that narrative, we can find the path of suffering. Because in there are our ideas about happiness. We want to walk on this path, this career, make these life decisions, because somewhere we have an idea that will bring us happiness. So learning to dwell happily in the present moment means looking into the path that we decide to take in every moment. Because every moment we have literally billions of possibilities of what we can think, what we can say, and what we can do. So by observing our own mind and seeing which narrative we choose, we are choosing a path of suffering or a path of happiness. And the insight of Plum Village is that we know the path we are on by our lived experience on that path. So if you suffer, you know that is the path of suffering. If you feel happiness, freedom, peace, you know you're walking on the path of happiness. You don't need to arrive at the end of the path before you find out which path it is. You know in every step, you arrive at every step along the path. And it's like the litmus test. Is it the path of suffering? Is it the path of happiness? And then you look, you shine the light of mindfulness on your own body and mind and observe, how do I feel in my body, in my feelings, in my perceptions? So this is our daily practice as monks and nuns and as lay practitioners. We start by being aware of our breath. So, for example, we might say, breathing in, I know I'm breathing in. Breathing out, I know I'm breathing out. In, out. That is one of the shortest guided meditations. But you can use it at any time during the day. When you wake up in the morning, before you put your feet on the floor, as you're laying in bed, you can just practice breathing in, I know I'm breathing in. Breathing out, I know I'm breathing out. In, out. And if you like, you can smile. This is a way of changing your habits, atomic habits. You atomize your habits. So you take that moment and you say, this is the moment I want to practice what the monk told me. Because in that moment, I felt some happiness and joy. And so I breathe in and I breathe out. And if you smile, you feel happier. You feel a little bit of joy. And so the next time, when you're feeling a difficult emotion, you remember, oh, I was smiling in that moment. Why don't I try that breathing thing again? And then you do it again. Breathing in, I know I'm breathing in. Breathing out, I know I'm breathing out. The more you do that, the more your capacity to be aware of your body and mind increases. Or another way we would say it is that the seed of mindfulness in your consciousness becomes stronger. Every time you practice that seed becomes a little bit stronger. It's not something you just say, but you have to practice it. And as that seed of mindfulness becomes stronger, it can shine the light on other objects. Mindfulness is always mindfulness of something. We start with mindfulness of the breath because the breath is always there. But as we expand our capacity to be aware of the breath, we can extend the awareness out to our whole body. So for example, breathing in, I'm aware of my whole body. Breathing out, I smile to my body. In, out. And so then our capacity to be aware is able to embrace our whole body, just as it is. So just like the cloud, we can let go of our expectations about our body, the way we like our body to appear, and we just accept, we can smile. We're just like a cloud. But we're aware of our body. We're aware of how it feels to be in our body. We're not lost in our mobile phone, in our iPad, or on the internet, or in dreaming about the future, or in regrets about the past. We're just fully there with how our body is in the present moment. This is very powerful practice. So starting with the breath, expanding the awareness to our body, and then as we begin to master that awareness of the breath and the body, we can extend our awareness out to our feelings. So breathing in, I'm aware of my feelings. Especially if we have a painful feeling, we can be aware of it. It could be a painful feeling. Maybe we're sitting, we're feeling a bit uncomfortable. Maybe there's maybe we have some injury or some illness in the body. So we can be aware of that painful feeling. But we can also practice to balance and be aware of those parts of our body which are not in pain. They're doing okay. And so we are not overwhelmed by that feeling of pain, that unpleasant emotion. One of the practices our teacher often gave us was to be aware of our neutral feelings. So right now, probably most of us are not in terrible pain, and we're also not experiencing kind of intense pleasure. Most of the feelings we're experiencing are what we call neutral feelings. They're not pleasant, but they're not painful. So the practice our teacher gave us was to be aware of neutral feelings and see that neutral feelings are pleasant feelings. So transforming the neutral feelings into a pleasant feeling. Sometimes he called it the practice of not having a toothache. So when you have a toothache, it's incredibly painful. One time I was in Thailand, and I had one of my wisdom teeth was coming out. And so there was a bit of my gum in the back that was still covering it. And at that time in Thailand, we were traveling with our teacher, and there's a lot of sugar in the food. And so somehow, and because it was in the back of my tooth, I'm trying to excuse myself because maybe I should have been brushing my teeth better. But somehow, the sugar got in the back and there was an infection. And I didn't take the antibiotic quick enough. And so it got very, very bad. And if you've ever had a toothache like that, you feel like you can't do anything. Somehow, I don't know, was this place in the back of your mouth, the back of your jaw connected to your ear and your eyes and nose and all that. So painful. So I remember I was lying there in the monk's residence, just almost immobile the entire day. I couldn't even think. It was so painful. Until the antibiotic was able to overcome the infection. And so I'm aware of that experience, and I know that now I don't have a toothache. In the present moment, I am experiencing a non-toothache. And that's a source of happiness. That's a condition for happiness. So all of us, most of us have experienced a toothache like that. So if you practice to see it like that, you remember when you have a painful feeling or a painful emotion. It might be a breakup in a relationship, someone that we cared so deeply about who betrayed us. And we feel so hurt. And we've held that hurt for so many years. But we can see right now, I'm not experiencing a breakup. Maybe some of us are experiencing a breakup in this audience, so we can send energy to support that person. But most of us, we are not experiencing a breakup right now. A painful emotion coming from our mind, coming from our attachment. And so we can enjoy our non-breakup, just like we enjoy our non-toothache. So that's how we transform a neutral feeling into a pleasant feeling, by seeing that it's a wonder to not be having a toothache. It's a wonder not to be experiencing a romantic breakup. So that we don't take for granted this present moment. The Buddha had a body, he had feelings, he had minds, just like we do. But he made the deep determination to understand the nature of his body and mind. He practiced mindful breathing, being aware of his feelings, and he knew how to take care of his emotions. So, as part of hammock meditation, we can follow the Buddha. We don't have to. If you like, you can practice sitting meditation. That's also wonderful. But maybe we feel a little bit tired, and it's hot outside, and it's the afternoon, and we have some lovely trees nearby. Or maybe you can put some hooks in your apartment. I have, in my room, in the residence, I have some hooks in the wall. And so I hang my hammock there. And now it's been so hot, I actually sleep in my hammock at night. And it's wonderful. I feel so rested. So I don't present something that I haven't put into practice. This is something I like to practice very much. The movement of the hammock, the feeling of being held, embraced. If we put the hammock outside, we can practice cloud watching. And while I'm lying in the hammock, I practice nowhere to go, nothing to do. I want to look into my suffering and see, how have I chosen the path of suffering? How do I continue to act in a way that I create suffering for myself and suffering for others? And by doing that, then I see that there's also happiness. All of us want to be happy. The problem is that most of us don't realize that suffering and happiness inter-are. That's a verb that our teacher liked to use, interbeing. We cannot be by ourselves alone. We can only interbe. With this body is a continuation of the cloud. We drink the water from the river, and that we are the continuation of the cloud. We are the continuation of the earth. In every cell of our body there is the earth. We are the continuation of our ancestors. So to say that we are a separate individual, cut off from the earth and the cloud and the parents, is to be very ignorant of reality. But it's not enough just to know, oh yeah, I know, we inter-are with all things. This is a meditation practice. So it's not a philosophy. It's something we put into practice and we observe in every moment in our body. We see that in order to breathe, we are dependent on the atmosphere. In order to eat, we are dependent on the food that's produced by the farmer and that is brought to our house, to the supermarket, and that we prepare in our kitchen. So to say that we can just live cut off from everything else is one of the most ignorant things we can say. So our teacher, in order to emphasize this, he talked about interbeing. We cannot be by ourselves alone. We can only interbe. So here at Deer Park Monastery, we have maybe 30 or 35 monks and nuns living together. The nuns down in Clarity and the monks up in Solidity. And if one of the monks decides, okay, I'm going to do this, and he doesn't ask the nuns in Clarity, then he will suffer. I speak from personal experience. Because I'm not practicing interbeing. Maybe I talk about interbeing, but I don't practice it. Right? So I need to learn that in order to live in community, I need to take refuge in the community, and I need to listen to the insight of my community. And when I do that, I suffer less. So that is the insight of happiness, that happiness inter-is with suffering. If we want to be happy, we need to see the roots of suffering and know how not to continue to nourish the seeds of suffering, not to continue to take that path of suffering, not to continue to hold on to that narrative that we have so dear in our heart about our own life, our own ambitions, our own idea of happiness. We learn to let go. And I find it particularly easy to let go of things when I'm swaying in a hammock. All my delusionary ideas about happiness and things that I want to do, I find it very easy to just let them go and just enjoy laying in the hammock, supported by the trees, looking up at the sky. And that letting go is what we call the path of happiness. So letting go is a very deep and powerful practice that is not something that I was trained in when I was a young boy, changing my hairstyle every year. I learned how to solve problems, but I didn't learn how to let go. And because of that, I thought, I can get anything that I want. I just set my mind to it. Kind of rugged individual philosophy, American attitude, right? And whatever I set my mind to, I can get it, even if it creates lots of suffering for myself and for other people. Of course, I didn't learn that part. Yeah. And so I proceeded to, when I created suffering for myself and for other people, I proceeded just to ignore it and just focus on my goal, what I wanted to realize. And I continued down the path of suffering. And please, we should understand that the path of suffering is something we choose in every moment. It's not like we chose it back 10 years ago and then we just live in regret every moment that we chose that path. That is and also a kind of ignorance, because we can change our narrative in any moment. Every moment you have the chance to transform. Every moment is a moment of endless possibility. We have neural pathways which we've reinforced through our ways of speaking, thinking, and acting. And so those can be very strong. The habits we've formed can be very strong. But in every moment we have a chance to take another path, to try letting go of our idea of happiness. And then we experience some joy. We experience peace. We experience freedom. We lay in the hammock. We just enjoy that moment. We don't have to do anything. We don't have to do our work in the hammock. It's okay, sometimes we can, but when we're practicing hammock meditation, we only do hammock meditation. So make sure your iPhone or your iPad, your laptop is very far away from the hammock. Put it on the other side of the room or leave it behind. If you like, you can have just a piece of paper and a pen. And from time to time, you might like to try writing on a piece of paper. But don't get too caught in the writing. But you're allowed to have a piece of paper, a notebook, and a pen for hammock meditation. Because sometimes you get a deep insight and you might like to write it down. But the core of hammock meditation is just to look within ourselves and see what are the things that are pulling me away from the present moment, that are keeping me, that are cutting me off from my experience of my feelings, my perceptions in the present moment. And look at those. Because what we think is what we become. Our thoughts are nourishment of our future thoughts and speech and action. And that is a practice of meditation on the source of nutriment. We are nourishing our future at every moment in the present. So we have to don't think that your thoughts are just neutral. They have a direction. And the more you feed your thinking, you feed yourself with your thinking, the more you go in that direction. So by practicing letting go of our notions, letting go of our idea about happiness, we touch happiness in the present moment. We touch freedom. And you get the taste. That's called the taste of Zen, or the taste of meditation. You know you still have a lot of attachment, you still have a lot of regrets and worry, but you had this taste of freedom. And that's enough. You want some more. You want more of that cool, refreshing, peaceful clarity. And so you continue and you make it part of your daily path. Okay, I'm going to practice hammock meditation because the monk told me I can do that. You are given permission. If you cannot practice sitting meditation, if you cannot practice walking meditation, I'm sure you can practice hammock meditation. And just laying in the hammock, letting go. Maybe sometimes you doze off, it's okay. But then when you wake up again, you just smile, you smile to the cloud. And you remember a cloud never dies. And you touch the freedom and peace in the present moment. And that is the taste of Zen, the taste of meditation. And that experience of peace continues to grow. You're nourishing yourself with the practice of hammock meditation. And it becomes more solid. So that when anxiety comes, and there are plenty of sources of anxiety that we encounter today, the climate crisis, division, misunderstandings, wrong perceptions, war, they are there. But if we don't master hammock meditation, how will we ever be able to take care of ourselves and help alleviate the suffering of others in the world? It's not possible. We cannot help others suffer less if we do not master the practice ourselves. So we start with a good environment. In a hammock between two trees is a very good environment to begin the practice of peace. And then that peace becomes more solid. And when we get up out of the hammock and we go and we deal with the conflict between our partner and our daughter, for example, we have peace to offer them. We have our freedom to offer. If we don't have that peace and freedom, how can we possibly offer a way out of the conflict for others? So the peace starts within. The way out, we say, is in. And if you want to try to solve the problem, you have to look in and see, have I transformed the conflict that's there in my heart? Because if I don't know how to transform that conflict, how will I ever transform the conflict out there? So that is the practice I offer for today, the practice of hammock meditation. And of course, you can do this practice without a hammock. If you don't have a hammock, you can practice what we call total relaxation, which is a kind of lying down meditation, where we're aware of every part of our body, and we practice gratitude and sending peace to every part of our body as we lie down. But I hope you all have a chance to practice hammock meditation. It's very easy nowadays. You can find hammocks very cheap. I remember a few years ago, I didn't have so much the practice. I didn't so often lay in a hammock. But one of my brothers, he saw at the local sports store near Plum Village in France, there were very inexpensive hammocks. So he bought a bunch of them, and then he gave me one. He gave them out. And so that was the beginning of my practice of hammock meditation. So maybe you have somebody like that, or you can, when you go to buy a hammock, you can buy two and offer one to somebody else. It's a very lovely way, because if you tell your loved one, your partner, you could do better practicing a little bit of meditation. Somehow they don't take it very well. I found that it's not a very skillful way of expressing our dissatisfaction with their behavior. But if you hand them a hammock, I think you might touch a seed of joy. You don't have to say anything. You don't have to make them watch this talk on YouTube about hammock meditation, because that's too much. Just give them a hammock. You don't need to say anything, and then just watch what happens. And eventually they might get curious. And when they get enthusiastic about the hammock, then maybe you can send them this talk. Okay. Thank you for listening. We'll finish with 3 sounds of the bell.